magnificent group of rock temples of Ellora, part of the world's heritage monuments and representing the three dominant religions of India, marks the final stage of rock cut activities in western India. The harmonious coexistence of the Buddhist, Hindu and Jain religions amply justifies the religious catholicity of the kings and the people of the period. The activities of this scale could see the light of the day as there was all-round peace and prosperity. The Ellora caves lay in the lap of the Charnadhari hill, extending over 1.25 miles in the north-south direction, and are situated 18 miles northwest of Aurangabad. The site also lay on an important trade route that came up, replacing the one near Ajanta that connected Paithan, the seat of the Satvahana dynasty, with other parts of northern and eastern India. Like Ajanta, Ellora was never discovered. It was always open for visit throughout the ages. It is referred to in the contemporary Rashtrakuta king's inscription and the travel accounts of the Arab and European travelers who visited India in the 9th and 10th century A.D. The cave monuments of Ellora were chiefly patronized by the Chalukya and Rashtrakuta rulers between the 7th and 10th centuries A.D. The kings and the mercantile community fully donated to the cause of temple building. The rulers were governed by certain religious injunctions and the ethical codes which prompted patronage of the works of art. Temple building was considered to help the attainment of worldly power as well as religious merit and spiritual salvation. The artists at Ellora were quick to respond to the urges and demands of their society. At Ellora, the artists rise to the heights of their creative dynamism. They acted out their passion and feeling, faith and sensibility. They drew themes for the sculptural panels from Hindu mythology and then transformed the rock into a cavalcade of gods and goddesses and judiciously portrayed the feelings of compassion, emotion, anger, hatred, fury of Shiva, and so on. The Buddhist caves appear to be the earliest in date, stretching from 600 to 900 AD. The Hindu caves from 650 to 1000 AD, while the Jaina group extended the activity from 800 to 1200 AD. It is therefore natural that Ellora represents not a single but a number of stylistic phases of Indian art. The architecture of Buddhist caves at Ellora revolves itself into three types: the vihara with a shrine and an antechamber at the back wall, cave 3 and 5. The vihara with a shrine isolated from the back wall and a circumambulatory passage around it, cave 8. And the vihara with multiple stories and walls depicting the sculptural panels instead of the cells, cave 11 and 12. The Hindu group of caves occupies the middle portion of the mountain slope. Cave 14 and 21 are similar to the Buddhist cave 8, where the shrine forms a separate entity with a circumambulatory passage around it. the most significant cave is the Great Cave 16 of Kailash. It is now established that the ceilings of the Kailasha, Jaina and Buddhist cave were covered with the mural decorative traditions evolved at Ajanta, the practice borrowed from Ajanta and continued at Ellora. One notices that the figures were not only carved but also modeled. While the white plaster was used to cover the volcanic rock, the finishing touches to eyes, noses and mouth were given in stucco. If the location of the Ellora lacks the scenic charm of Ajanta, the Kailash Temple alone compensates for everything. Instead of the mural paintings, we have here a gallery of sculptures which are more permanent, if not more refined. Ellora also provides a desirable variety of themes and motifs, as it gives concrete expression to the three major religious faiths of ancient India. By and large, in its visible details and its variety of multiple expressions, the Ellora has a slight edge over the Ajanta. After the fall of the Gupta dynasty in 7 AD, their feudatories became independent in the Deccan. Their imperial ambitions, tastes and prejudices resulted in the creation of a strong regional personality, expressing itself in the life and civilization of its personality of its people. Sculptures in the temples at Madurai and Elephanta have explicitly displayed such regional characteristics. Similar expressions can be seen at Ellora too. The most wonderful monument ever created by mankind on the earth is the Kailash Temple. It is an illustration of one of those rare occasions when men's minds, hearts and hand in unison work to build this feat. The Kailash represents the final stage of perfection in Hindu rock-cut architecture and constitutes a class by itself. The entire edifice was boldly and confidently chiseled out of solid rock. The excavation method adopted by the artists was to create an island out of the mountain in rectangular shape by cutting trenches into it vertically, from which was chiseled out the main body of the temple. Because the mountain faces west, the axial alignment of the temple is from west to east. The temple rests on a raised plinth and consists of the sanctum cell, where Lord Shiva is enshrined as a linga. The construction of the temple itself suggests the abundant resources of the Rashtrakuta king, Krishna I. The sculptures at Kailash are distinguished by the dynamic energy, gigantic forms of modeling, and animated expression. They represent mythology and incidents from the two epics of the Hindus, the Ramayana and the Mahabharata. Again, the celestials, the nymphs, and the variety of floral designs provide a beauty to the sculptural gallery.
Fort of Daulatabad. On the way to Ellora, at a distance of 15 kilometers from Aurangabad, is the invulnerable fort that resisted many onslaughts from the medieval sultans of Delhi. Dating back to the 12th century A.D., the fort was the capital of Hindu kingdom in Deccan, and all military expedition by the imperial rulers down south were directed from this impregnable bastion. An isolated mountain peak with a conical shape has been trimmed vertically to a height of about 150 feet and has a deep moat running around at the base. Its planning is incredible. The walls and gateways were constructed such a way as to mislead the enemy and check his entry and annihilate them at all intervening corners. As one passes through a most arduous, awe-inspiring and treacherously meandering dark passage which even to casual visitors has a spine-chilling effect. The Panchaki or the watermill, located at Aurangabad, was built in the early years of the 17th century by the Muslim Sufi saint Baba Shah Musaffir. The complex of Panchaki had been a place of external abode of great Sufi saints who flocked to India in the 12th century AD. The Sufis were the Muslim saints influenced by the spiritual philosophy of Vedanta. The Sufi movement in India is reminiscence of secularism. The Panchaki is a calm and peaceful place that visualizes the life that existed in the medieval period. Visitors having sensitive imagination may hear the beats of drum and the humming noise of people moving round the complex. The water flows down through clay pipes based on the siphon system from the distance of 11 kilometers. This marvelous watermill was designated to generate energy to turn the large grinding stone serving as a flour mill. Bibika Maqbara. 8 kilometers away from the town of Aurangabad is a mausoleum built in the memory of Dilras Banu Begum, the wife of the last Mughal king Aurangzeb. Built in the 18th century AD, the monument's architectural features suggest that the builders of the Maqbara were inspired by the plan of the Taj Mahal. While the Taj Mahal was built in the days when Mughal architectural activities were at its zenith, the Maqbara is a poor imitation of Taj Mahal and symbolizes the lack of interest by the subsequent Mughal rulers. Unlike the Taj Mahal, the Maqbara stands at the center of the garden and thus is more symmetrical. While the Taj is lavished with fine quality of marble and exuberant with variety of arabesque and fine inlay work, the Maqbara has fine stucco work.
The gateway of India, from which the caves of Elephanta can be reached, was built in 1911 to commemorate the visit of King George V. Despite its colonial associations, the triple-arched gateway resembles the Muslim architecture of the 16th century. It was constructed from the yellow basalt quarried from the nearby hills of Mumbai city. The Taj Mahal Hotel, an institution in itself, has been the epicenter of Mumbai's social swirl. Built in 1903 by the renowned industrialist of India, Mr. J.N. Tata, is a magnificent structure bearing Moorish influences and is crowned by a grand red-roofed dome. A chugging ferry ride from the gateway of India, surpassing the fishing boats, large ships, little islands, and occasionally leaping fishes, takes you in 40 minutes to the island of Elephanta, the glorious abode of Lord Shiva, a supreme god in Hindu mythology. The island of Elephanta, being a commercial, military and religious center for centuries, has traces of early Buddhist culture. With the resurgence of the Brahminical era during the reign of the Gupta dynasty in the 3rd century A.D., the great cave dedicated to Lord Shiva exploded into existence at Elephanta. Legends and history suggest that the great warrior prince of the Chalukya dynasty, Pulakesin II, raised the shrine to celebrate his victory. Some historians also suggest that the cave was built by the Kalchuri king Krishna Raja in the 6th century A.D. As the worship of the figure of the Buddha began to be encouraged with the rise of the Mahayana sect of Buddhism, a shrine was introduced to house Buddha's image, replacing the cells at the center of the back wall. The monasteries of Ajanta lead us directly to Elephanta. It appears that the same families of craftsmen and sculptors who were working on the Kailash Temple of Ellora and adjoining Buddhist caves at Ellora